Hi, I'm William,
And I'm Kat,
and this is Info on the Go.
answering questions you want to know.
So, today we're going to be talking about clothing, the history of clothing, how it came about, a couple of different theories about clothing. And you know what, Kat? Why don't you tell us what clothing is?
Clothing, also known as clothes, garments, dress, apparel, or attire, is any item worn on the body. Typically, clothing is made of fabrics or textiles, but over time it has included garments made from animal skin and other thin sheets of materials and natural products found in the environment put together. The wearing of clothing is mostly restricted to human beings and is a feature of all human societies. The amount and type of clothing worn depends on gender, body type, social factors, and geographic considerations. Footwear covers garments cover the body, footwear covers the feet, gloves cover the hands, while hats and headgear cover the head. And underwear covers our private parts.
I had to put that in there. Um, so it says, clothing is worn by most humans. I'm assuming we're talking about like the people that dress up their dogs, cats, and like I imagine like the monkeys you see with the diapers on. That has to be the
Yeah,
other part that's wear- wearing clothing, right?
right. That's definitely human instilled.
Yeah, for sure. So, the origin and purpose of clothing. There's a couple of theories out there. The modesty theory, clothing originated to conceal body parts out of sense of shame or modesty. The immodesty theory, early clothing aimed to attract attention to sexual features. Adornment theory, clothing served as decoration and to display aesthetic. What is that?
Aesthetic.
Aesthetic expression. Oh my gosh. Um, Protection theory. Clothing provided physical protection from natural elements and threats. So, the prehistoric period, you want to cover that, Cat?
Sure. The first known humans to make clothing, the Neanderthal man, survived from about 200,000 BCE to about 30,000 BCE. During this time, the Earth's temperature rose and fell dramatically, creating a series of ice ages through the northern areas of Europe and Asia where the Neanderthal man lived. With their compact, muscular bodies that conserved body heat, Neanderthals were well adapted to the cold climate of their day. But it was their large brain that served them the best. Neanderthal man learned to make crude but effective tools from stone. Tools such as spears and axes made Neanderthals strong hunters, and they hunted the hairy mammoths, bears, deer, musk oxen, and other animals that shared their environment. At some point, Neanderthals learned how to use the thick, furry hides from these animals to keep themselves warm and dry. With this discovery, clothing was born.
It is not certain when people first started wearing clothes. However, anthropologists give estimates that range between 100,000 to 500,000 years ago. Wow, that's a big swing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
The first clothes were made from natural elements, animal skin and furs, grasses and leaves, and bones and shells. Clothing was often draped or tried or tied. However, simple needles made out of animal bone provided evidence of sewn leather and fur garments from at least 30,000 years ago.
That's still pretty far back to have little needles.
Yeah, think about it. And I wonder what they were using. I'm assuming like shreds of leather or something other to kind of like sew with.
Right, right, same. I
Yeah.
wonder I wonder how they figured out how best to tan the leather. Like how did leather tanning
We'll
happen?
put that down as an episode for tanning hides.
Yeah, sounds like a good plan.
Not like the ones that I used to get before and after church.
Well, I didn't go to church, but I understand.
I used to get in a lot of trouble, I'm sure. I promise you I did. When settled, Neolithic cultures discovered the advantages of woven fibers over animal hides. The making of clothes, drawing, or basketry techniques emerged as one humankind's fundamental technologies.
Then we kind of roll into the Cro-Magnon man, considered the next stage in human development, emerged around 40,000 years ago and made advances in the clothing of the Neanderthals. The smarter Cro-Magnon people learned how to make fire and cook food, and they developed finer, more efficient tools. Sharp awls or pointed tools were used to punch small holes in animal skins, which were laced together with hiding string. In this way, they probably developed the earliest coverings for the body, legs, head, and feet.
Hmm. Um, it is thought that the first assembled piece of clothing was the tunic. A tunic is made from two pieces of rectangular animal hide bound together uh, on one short side with a hole left for the head. So is that like the tunic, like where the you know like you see like just a hole cut for the head and it just kind of drapes over the arms?
I think so. Kind of like a pillowcase
Yeah, yeah.
with a
Okay.
hole in it. Maybe a poncho.
Yeah, something like that without the hood. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking about. This rough garment was placed over the head and the stitch length lay on the shoulders. Yeah, okay. With the remainder hanging down. The arms stuck out the open sides, and the garment was either closed with a belt or additional ties were placed on the sides to hold the garment on the body. This tunic was the ancestor of the shirt. Yeah, so okay, I get what they're saying now. Like you could hold it down and then use like a belt or something that would kind of tie it down and hold it up against the body.
Right, right. So it doesn't flap everywhere.
Yeah. One of the most important Cro-Magnon inventions was the needle. Needles were made out of slivers of animal bone. They were sharpened to a point. One end had an eye on sharpened on one end, and the other end had an eye on it. With a needle, Cro-Magnon man and women could so carefully cut pieces of fur into better fitting garments.
Evidence suggests that Cro-Magnon people developed close-fitting pants and shirts that would protect them from the cold, as well as shawls, hoods, and long boots. Because they had not learned how to tan hides to soften them, the animal's skin would have been stiff at first, but with repeated wearings, it would become very soft and comfortable. I
It's
can
kind of like
imagine it
that
was
old,
pretty stiff
you
if
know,
you're not tanning it. I oof.
did you ever play baseball?
No.
Well,
No.
so you get that glove, man, you got to work that thing, because when you first get it, it's stiff. You,
Oh
you know,
yeah, I
you,
mean I know the difference between a fresh glove and a worn glove. I
you-
do understand that part.
okay, so basically that's what that is. They got to break it in. They got to get it well worn. Uh,
Right, right.
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
You're good. Much of what is known about early clothing is a patchwork of very little is very little evidence and good guesses. Only fragments of very early clothing have survived. So archaeologists have relied on cave drawings, carved figures, and such things as the imprint of stitched together skins in a fossilized mud floor to develop their picture of early clothing. The discovery of remains of a man who died 5,300 years ago in the mountains of Austria near the border with Italy helped confirm much of what these archaeologists had discovered. The body of this male hunter had been preserved in ice for over 5,000 years, and many fragments of his clothing had survived.
And we're talking about Utsi.
Yes, I
Um,
remember that when that first came out on the National Geographic Channel.
oh man, and then they wound up finding more pieces, around that area, like a spear, an axe,
Yeah,
uh, just some crazy stuff, like things that archaeologists at the time didn't think Cro-Magnon people had, and here
right,
Utsi had it.
right.
Um, so archaeologists pieced together his garments, and they found that the Iceman, or Utsi, as he became known, wore a complex outfit. Carefully sewn leggings covered his lower legs, and a thin leather loincloth was wrapped around his genitals and buttocks. Over his body, the man wore a long-sleeved fur coat that extended nearly to his knees. The coat was sewn from many pieces of fur, with the fur on the outside, and that is huge, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was likely held close by some form of a belt. On his feet, Utsi wore an animal hide short boot stitched together with hiding the stuff. The
With
stuff
hiding
with
and stuffed with grass.
Yes, thank you.
Hmm.
Probably to keep his feet warm in the snow. On his
Warm and
head,
dry.
yeah, for real. On his head, Ötzi wore a simple cap of thick fur, though the Iceman was discovered in Austria, appeared much later than the earliest Cro-Magnon man. The way his clothing was made confirmed the basic techniques and materials of early clothing. The ravages of time have destroyed most direct evidence of the clothing of early man. However, the history of clothing goes with the history of textiles. Humans had to invent weaving, spinning, and other techniques and machines needed to be able to make the fabrics used for clothing.
So the functions of clothing are protection against the climate, injuries, and environmental factors, adornment, decorative purses to express identity or aesthetics, identification, social and cultural symbols reflecting status or group belonging, especially back in the Renaissance time.
Sure.
Modesty, conforming to societal norms of covering the body, status, displaying rank, wealth, or power, also goes into the identification.
And they were saying some of the archaeologists believe that Ötzi, the Iceman, was high ranked. They
Hmm.
don't believe a lot of his clothing was special. They believe a lot of his clothing was special, and the fact that he was buried or was found with his bronze axe and stuff lead them to believe he was a high-ranking official. So, with displaying rank, wealth, and power goes back that far with clothing.
Right. Ancient civilizations like Greece and Rome favored wide, unsewn lengths of fabric from which they constructed their clothing. Fabric was expensive and they didn't want to cut it. Ancient Greek clothing was made of lengths of rectangular wool or linen cloth, which was secured at the shoulders with ornamented pins and belted with a sash. Women wore loose robes called peplos. Men wore cloaks called hmm, chlamys, maybe?
Nice. I like it.
Um, while both men and women wore chitin, it was a type of tunic which was short to the knees for men and longer for women.
And we
I
all
mean,
know
I
what
think that you
those,
get like that's where you get toga.
yeah, and we all know what those look like. We've all seen like the Roman
Hmm.
displayed out on film and movies and stuff.
Yeah, Roman and Greece, even
Yes.
as early as Hercules.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Hmm.
Let's see. The toga of ancient Rome was worn by free Roman men citizens and was also an unsewn length of wool cloth. Under the toga, they wore a simple tunic, which was made from two simple rectangles joined at the shoulders and sides. Roman women wore the draped stola or tunic that had length to the ground. During the Iron Age, that lasted from 12 BC to 500 AD, women of Northern Europe wore wool dresses, tunics, and skirts, which were held in place with leather belts and metal brooches or pins. Men wore breeches with, I guess that's where breeches come from. Is that breeches?
Probably, well, you would say breeches, but I'm sure that through time it did turn into breeches.
Yeah, with leg wrappers and for protection for and long trousers. They also wore caps and shawls made from animal skin and soft lace shoes made from leather. I just have a question. Could you imagine wearing a dress today made of wool?
Ooh,
I
ooh,
mean,
you hit me with a hard one. That's oof. That sounds thick and hot.
they could not have been living in South Georgia to do that,
Oh no. Oh no.
or Texas
Mm.
or Arizona or anywhere else for that fact.
Ain't none of them.
It,
That would lead me into looking at what the dress was for the Middle East or India.
I'm telling you.
Oof. So
Mm,
during medieval times, the Byzantines made and exported very richly patterned cloth. Expensive variant was woven and embroidered, while the cheaper, intended for lower classes, was resist dyed
yeah,
and printed. They wore tunics or long chitons over which they wore. Hmm,
it's a Latin word. Delmentica,
Dalmatica, maybe,
Delmatica. Okay, I like yours better.
which is a heavier and shorter type of tunic or long cloaks.
In the Renaissance, Europe, wool, um, in Renaissance Europe, wool remained the most popular fabric for all classes, but the linen and hemp were also used. More complex clothes were made, and urban middle class joined the fashion that was set by higher class and royalties. Early modern Europe from the 16th century sees even more complex fashion with ruffs, um, passementer, passementer,
Passementerie,
passementerie. Yeah, okay.
hmm
And necklace.
needle
Elegant
lace.
needle
That says
lace.
needle lace.
It does say needle lace. Just seeing if you're paying attention.
Oh, yeah.
Enlightenment introduced two types of clothing: full dress worn at court and for formal occasions, and underdress, which were everyday daytime clothes. Full dress almost disappeared by the end of the 18th century.
Sorry about choke there. This leads us to the Industrial Revolution, which will be a future show on its own because that's a lot. The functions of clothing was protection against climate injuries and environmental factors, decorative purposes to express identity or aesthetics, identification, modesty, status, and the origin of costumes, which was derived from a Latin word, huh, consuetudo.
Pensuto. I tried to look this up. I couldn't. I couldn't get a pronunciation for it.
Mm.
But
Meaning a
it,
complete set of outer garments. If anybody has any better Latin understanding, feel free to leave a pronunciation for us. Initially tied to cultural identity, class, and profession, later evolved into theatrical and symbolic uses such as Halloween costumes. Cultural and technological shifts. Clothing was transitioned from fixed, locally specific designs to modish, rapidly changing fashion influenced by global trends. Early hand sewn garments were labor intensive, but industrialization introduced mass production, making fashion more accessible.
we should really do a show about hemp. Um, we were
Yeah, I mean,
talking
because that's a
about
whole different section by itself, too,
for sure. It was one of the major crops outside of cotton. Um,
for a long
and
time.
yeah, we'll definitely add that on there. Well, I guess that
Different
brings us to the
lifestyle.
end of clothing, unless you got anything else you want to add.
Um, Not really. I mean, if anybody wants us to delve deeper into certain eras of fashion and what kind of outfits they wore, we'd be more than happy to do that. That's all I got.
Yes, because we just kind of glossed over what clothing is and as it kind of evolved through the ages uh,
Right.
before the sewing machine. Definitely probably want to look at hand woven and maybe, Eli Whitney's cotton gin and how that exploded. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, we
Different
can def
textiles. But if we do, I mean, textiles should be an episode on its own.
for sure, for sure.
So,
Um, Follow us on Facebook at Info on the Go.
or wherever, or follow us wherever you get your podcasts and give us a review.
And you know what? I'll let Kat read it.
All righty.
With that being said, that's Info on the Go.
Catch you later.